answers if they're not speaking, so that we can, answer as many questions as, in case if we want to. Otherwise, we can always take them towards the end.
It's better we take them towards the end.
Presentation mode, no?
Sure.
Sachin, Arvind here, it's better if we can take it towards the end, take the questions towards the end.
Sure. I guess, Paul, we start.
Just trying to get Nancy to put this in presentation mode. All right, Sachin, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our European participants. Thank you very much for being here and taking time out as a new version, new edition of our webinar series on ICT topic. We already covered artificial intelligence, and today we'd really like to speak about the fourth industrial revolution. And we have a high-powered set of panelists to discuss on the topics. It's a mix of government stakeholders, private sector stakeholders, representatives of academia as well. So I think we're covering the whole round. It's a mix also of European stakeholders and Indian stakeholders. And by way of a bit of background, just so you know who all we are, I'm Paul Jensen. I'm the Managing Director of the European Business and Technology Center, which has been around for 11 years now. Focusing on making collaborations happen at a business and at a research level, technology level, between Europe and India. ICT is one focus area for us. I'm accompanied by Sachin Gaur, who is heading an EU project called the India-EU ICT Standardization Collaboration, also focusing obviously on ICT. Furthermore, apart from being the MD of EBTC, I'm also the team leader of the business support to the EU-India policy dialogues, which broken down really means get business involved in the dialogue that the EU and India is having at the policy level to be sure that policy intent is aligned with what businesses want to do, to ensure that any policy makers, any decisions that are taken are actually long-term. The fourth industrial revolution has been, a topic on everybody's mind, specifically, I mean, very focused for the last 5 years. Obviously, it's been around for longer. We're going to listen today what is being done by industry, what is government doing to encourage that the collaborations, the development of fourth industrial revolution is happening. We're going to discuss a bit whether the current pandemic situation is actually accelerating the uptake of technologies, including technologies around solutions for the fourth industrial revolution. So it's going to be quite exciting. For your information, myself and Sachin will be picking up and listening in a lot on what you're all saying, because our mandate is to put frameworks and systems and platforms in place to enable collaboration to happen, to smoothen out any, if we can, irregularities or hurdles that are there for collaboration to happen in this space. So some of our panelists will also talk a bit about this as well. It's all set for interesting discussions that Sachin and I will lead. I'm happy to welcome first of all Mr. Benoit Sauveroche, who's the first counsel at the European Union delegation to India, and within his portfolio he has ICT, and very well versed in also the fourth industrial revolution, as you will come to know. His counterpart from the Indian side is Mr. R.K. Pathak, who's from the Department of Telecommunication of the Ministry of Communication. So thank you also very much to you for being here, Mr. Pathak. And we also welcome Aravind Raman, who's the head of global software engineering at Bosch here in India, who will also give some insights to what does Bosch do in Europe, what does Bosch do in India, what are the challenges there. Welcome Aravind, and Satish Jamadandi from Reliance Jio, who also has some insights into this, and with being with Reliance Jio, obviously putting a big footprint in India and also on the fourth industrial revolution is expected. So we're looking forward to hear about that, Satish, as well. And from Deutsche Telekom, we have Tomas Nowotny, who also spends his time on a day-to-day basis looking at fourth industrial revolution technology and solution, and as a provider, as a telecom provider, also provided solutions to support the fourth industrial revolution. So that is it from me for now. I will hand over to Sachin. Maybe you can give a welcome in a bit more technical terms. I will focus on business, you focus on technology, Sachin, and together we're strong and we'll create something that is impactful. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Indeed, it's a great pleasure for me to build this conversation with you today. As you rightly said, we have a high-powered panel here today, and it will be good learning for both of us. How could we, be part of creating more support structures here. In addition to the people you already mentioned, I would also like to welcome Jaspreet from Aalto University in Finland. And Jaspreet is for last 4 years has been researching the topic of 5G in fourth industrial revolution. And as you know, Indian talent is everywhere. So I could find from Finland an Indian person, right? So welcome Jaspreet as well. And as you also said, to expand on the technical side, I think at least Industry 4.0, which is quite also popular as a terminology or phrase, and then comes the fourth industrial revolution. So I would admit, maybe for many years I was confused, the difference between the two. And then I picked up a book from Klaus Schwab, the chairman of World Economic Forum, and then I realized that, if we use the word fourth industrial revolution, maybe we are targeting a broader domain here, which can be enabled by, this technology. And when we were planning this webinar, as you know, Paul, we have chosen the title Enablers for Fourth Industrial Revolution. So Klaus Schwab in his book, he talks about 12 fundamental technologies, and some of the technologies we are already working already for many years in our project, them being 5G and IoT. But I think increasingly we see, much more discussion about other topics as well, like AI, VR, and others. So it's definitely a big wave coming, and we can see increasingly in the geopolitical scenario how technology is becoming the next big thing in all kind of conversations. Even in the COVID pandemic, we have seen how technology has been very much of a lifesaver. If you remember, Paul, we were just joking yesterday how vulnerable we are to our internet connections. And imagine this entire show today can just go down, if we face some kind of a bandwidth issue or a cybersecurity issue. So indeed, technology is enabling us, and at the same time, we are also a bit too dependent on it. But I think the conversation today we are looking at is more on the economic side. And I think India has a lot of aspirations when it comes to, putting itself, I would say, supplier for the world when it comes to, you know, a lot of manufacturing and other things. And I think technology can play a big role in India's ambition. I think Europe is also, you know, already working in this. You know, some people were joking with me before that Industry 4.0 is a German, you know, phrase. So maybe Thomas can expand on that, you know, how Industry 4.0 and how the transition is now to the fourth industrial revolution. But I would not probably take a lot of the time, and maybe without getting into the details, you know, which I think can be better covered by the panel today, I would stop here, and I would probably from time to time quote important findings that has been there from my readings. So without further ado, Paul, should we welcome now Benoit to share, you know, his observations from the European side. Benoit.
Thank you very much, Sachin, and thank you, Paul. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Before sharing information, I would just like to react on the point that you mentioned in your introduction, Sachin, where you mentioned that we may be too dependent on the technology. I would beg to disagree. I mean, the point is just to be sure that we have a technology which is reliable enough so that we don't feel that we are too dependent. And I will come back on this issue because I think it's one of the key issues and which has been even made more prevalent in the recent times. But anyway, so it's my pleasure to give this presentation and give the global perspective. I would like to just to explain what, in my mind, are these enablers of this fourth industrial revolution. What does the European Union do about that, and why does it make sense that we collaborate with India in order to make this revolution a reality? So the first aspect is this revolution, and this revolution is about connectivity. I was trying to get it into a few words, and I believe that the main element of that is to remind that we will have a new source of energy. Even if it's a virtual energy, I would consider that data will be the fuel that will enable this revolution. You know that many people say, oh, data is the new oil. I think in many people's mind, it's about the revenue that you can generate. For me, it's very much, I mean, the fuel that will make the engine of this revolution working. Based on this data, so we will have processes, and you mentioned artificial intelligence. To have artificial intelligence working, I mean, you need to have these enablers, which are the cloud computing linked to the high performance computing, which will be able to process this enormous amount of data. We also have a revolution in the term of communication of data, generation and communication. And that's, you mentioned it already, another enabler, the Internet of Things, which will enable this communication between devices to computer or machine to machine. And the last one, and not the least one, enabler, which will allow the transport of this energy, of this data, in a very reliable way, ultra-fast transport, massive transport, and also in a wireless format that is 5G. And 5G is also a key element, a key enabler of this revolution. I would add another one, which is a transversal or horizontal enabler, and we've mentioned it already, that's cybersecurity. Cybersecurity will be key to ensure the reliability of all the system, and we'll come back on that. I mean, it's not only reliability on the core technologies, be it hardware, software, or even the network, but it will also encompass all the enabling technologies. What does the European Union do to promote and to nurture this revolution? We used to say at the European Commission that we base our activities on 5 pillars. The first one is the coordination. You know that the EU is not a single governmental body. We have 27 member states which are working together in a common market, in a single market. And therefore, it's essential that we have coordination of activities to ensure a seamless single market across borders. The second one is foster innovation through digital innovation hubs. We have these innovation testing areas where small and medium enterprises can get advice and test these new categories of technologies. The third one is essential because we have massive investments needed in order to make this revolution a reality. That's the private public partnership. And that allows as well to have everybody aligned in a same objective. And we have that for many of the enablers that I mentioned. So we have, for instance, for 5G PPP with the 5G Industry Association, gathering the private part. We have it for data. We have this big data value PPP. We even have it for high performance computing, where we have this European technology platform for HPC PPP as well. The fourth element, or the fourth pillar, is the human pillar. You understand that we need new skills in order to make this revolution a reality. So these new technologies will necessitate new skills, but also the revolution will make, as all revolution, redundant a number of previous skills. So we need to be sure that the government will accompany this revolution to ensure that no one is left behind and that there is a reskilling. The last element that I kept, whereas, I mean, the EU is usually seen mainly on that point, is the regulatory element. And regulation is not necessarily here to punish or to make things more difficult. I will just take two examples. The first one is the Electronic Communication Code, which was adopted last year, which is actually creating an environment of predictability for the investors. So people or the companies can understand that when they will invest, they have a long-term vision of what they can expect on one side, and on the other side, equally for the consumers, there will be a framework for optimal competition. The other regulation that I would like to mention is regarding cybersecurity, with the Cybersecurity Act adopted last year, and this year the Cybersecurity Agency, which created this toolbox of measures which will allow to address this cybersecurity aspect in a comprehensive way, be it on the technical or on the strategic elements. A last element, which is not part of the pillar, but which has been very much a priority for the European Union, has been working since the beginning on standards. You know, with 27 member states, I mean, we've learned it the hard way, that national standards or this atomization of standards is very detrimental to the benefit of all. And therefore, it's now in our DNA that it's, of course, best to have these interoperable standards, which will allow connectivity, whatever the operating systems, for instance. I mean, it's essential for this new Internet of Things that we have interoperability of data, that we have adoption of global or common platform, that we are able to retrieve the data, be it from different sources, and to integrate it for meaningful analysis. And all these elements, I mean, would be relevant for collaboration with India. And I would say that the collaboration with India makes sense on three elements. The first one is on the policy element. And it makes sense because we share common values. And therefore, together, we can shape a global agenda. And we can shape it at the international level. And we do have already a number of platforms or alliances where India and the EU join their forces, either for the data, we have the Research Data Alliance, or very recently, the adoption of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, where we're trying together to shape the global agenda, which is discussed in international fora such as the G20. But it makes sense also to exchange bilaterally. And there we have a very active joint working group gathering policymakers from the EU and from India, meeting on an annual basis where we share experience and information on where we are. I would say, for instance, the sharing that we did last year on the deployment of 5G, which is very, very relevant, or the experience that we have with our electronic communication code on spectrum management, for instance, the idea of licensing and sharing the code, the deployment, the practical aspects on access of civil engineering, for instance, how do we make it? And therefore, by exchanging ideas, I think, we can mutually benefit of our experience. So that's an aspect on the policy. The second one, and we are going to discuss it very much here, is the discussion on the collaboration on research and innovation. And here, it's driven by the fact that we have a lot of complementarity between the EU and India. It's seen, and we have some of the companies here. We have many European companies. Bosch is here, but Philips, the car manufacturers, who do have research and innovation center here in India. But equally, Indian software companies, Tata Consulting Services, HCL, a number of them are very present and active in innovation in the EU, and therefore it makes sense to collaborate. At a smaller level, EBTC, of course, is here and is a living proof of the activities that are being done in trying to bring this ecosystem of the smaller and medium enterprises together. We also have this EU-India innovation platform, which is gathering these incubators from both sides, which are pooling their efforts. So the second point is this one on collaboration. We have some more institutional collaboration. We've discussed as recently as last week on the possible collaboration on high performance computing and activities which are performed both by Center of Excellence in the EU and in India for possible exchange of experience. So exchanging trials as well. So that's the second element. And the last element that I will mention is the very reason why you are here, Sachin, which is the work on standardization. And I think, you've done a tremendous job with your project here in bringing closer together the Indian and European ecosystem on standardization. And I think, we've seen a lot of development of the potential of both, and including, Indians being brought to adopt, of course, these international standards on IoT. So we've seen, be it at the regulatory level, at the developer level, with the creation of Center of Excellence, or the uptake by the industry. But adoption is not enough. You need to contribute to the shaping also of this standard. And that's where, your project has been key in supporting the standard defining organization from India to participate into the global forum. Is everything perfect? No, that's a process, we're learning. And actually the best way to fully participate, and that's one of the lessons that we have from that, is to be ready from the early stage of the development. And that's why I would like to finish by mentioning that we are working on the fourth revolution, but maybe we should already prepare the fifth revolution or the continuation of the fourth. And there is already some discussion and preparatory research work, fundamental research on the beyond 5G technologies and the 6G. And that's where we should join our forces from the beginning to be sure that everybody has his place in the development of standards and based on shared and understood requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoit, and thank you for reiterating the need for collaboration or the benefit of collaboration. Also in a world where we somehow see that we, in certain areas, are moving towards more island thinking, isolation, whatever, but I completely agree with you that collaboration is a faster way forward to growth and to mutual benefit. And I'm sure Mr. Pathak will also echo your views on that. And it's exactly also what Sachin and I are here to do. And I'm sure you will also see that companies like Bosch also collaborate. When Aravind will talk about the ecosystem that he works in, it's all about collaboration. It's much more challenging very often, but it's also much more inspiring and leads to more solutions and a growth that is more valuable to all. And you can see Geo also growing and expanding, and it's all about partnerships. It's all about collaboration also for Geo. So I'm sure that's going to be a big topic within our panel. So before we go into the panel discussion, we'd like to invite Jaspreet. My apologies, Jaspreet. It was not intentionally that I left you out in the original introduction. You're very important now because you are going to set some context on 5G as an enabler, one of the many enablers of the fourth industrial revolution from your perspective. And I think that will also, along with Benoit's words, sort of set the tone, set some inspiration for a good talk with our panelists. Jaspreet?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, so I have been working on my PhD, and I'm working in this network economics research group at Aalto University. And over the past some years, we have worked in several 5G research projects that have focused especially on different industry verticals that are involved in the fourth industrial revolution, such as the smart factories, campuses, power grid, and so on. And if you think about, next slide. If we think about the fourth industrial revolution, it's not simply about automation or modernization. It also requires a lot of integration on a system level for cyber physical systems and processes. And that not only requires one vertical or one use case, but several industry verticals and all their stakeholders and use cases coming together. And when we talk about different use cases, they all require different types of connectivity requirements. And thus we have been looking at 5G and more especially like network slicing. And in my recent publications, we have worked on developing network slice management models, strategies, business models for service provisioning of 5G services for factories and so on. And also we have basically, in a nutshell, we can say that we are working towards improving the strategic use of 5G for benefiting the industries. All right, next slide. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so that was basically the introduction from my side about why 5G is a key enabler. And some activities that I would go through now that are happening in Finland are as follows. So we have several research projects that are ongoing. And I have also put some links that you can find the results and the future timelines for these projects and how they are collaborating together. So this the first project that I'm mentioning is the micro operator 5G. So in this project, they have looked at developing local network operators, both technically and business-wise. And the results are already available, and you can also get in touch with the respective researchers if you need. And the next project is 5G Force, in which they have continuously kept building and testing 5G test network within the Aalto University. And the network is available for researchers and collaborators to test their 5G services if they want. And the next one is that's more focused on the vertical industry part of fourth industrial revolution, and that's the 5G VIMA. In this project, we have looked at developing the use cases further. So in this, we have looked at factories, campuses, and the power grid. And myself, I have been involved in the factory use case and the smart campuses use case. And all of these projects are collaborating together as well in under one project portfolio called the 5G Test Network Finland. And within this portfolio, you can find these different projects as well as ways to collaborate with them. And an interesting thing about these research projects is not just that it's academically and industrially oriented. It involves the collaboration from both sides, as well as the collaboration from the regulatory authority of Finland. And they provide their guidance in regulatory and policy related matters to the involved researchers. And And another thing to note is that Finland already has one 6G flagship project that's aimed at finalizing and promoting the adoption of 5G in industries, and also at the same time building the fundamental concepts for the upcoming 6G, or so to say beyond 5G networks. In this project, we have published some 6G white papers about what basically 6G would be, what would be missing in 5G, and what all we have to do in the future timeline, several years, maybe a decade. And an interesting thing that would be also a knowledge sharing day would be this upcoming 5G test network results seminar in August. It's a free event, and people can obviously register and join for that. And if you would like to get in touch with any researchers from this project or collaborate with me, you can obviously contact me. And all through Sachin, you can get connected. And sorry, next slide. Yeah, apart from the work that I have been doing and the research projects that I have been involved in, there are several recent developments that have happened in Finland in general that are very much relevant today and in the future. So we have this IoT campus that is being set up for where new players as well as established players can come together and build their IoT products and services. And this enables for new small startups to get a platform to start developing without having to develop the factories and the platforms themselves. And next thing that is quite important is that the public safety organization, they have started their migration from Tetra-based dedicated networks to cellular commercial networks. And what that does is it enables them to provide higher data rate connectivity and enable drone assistance, video surveillance for safety purposes and so on in emergency scenarios, etc. And in Finland, we have had this 3.5 gigahertz spectrum auction last year, and the 26 gigahertz spectrum auction recently this month, in which the 3 major operators have gotten the spectrum licenses. While the local operation for these licenses is also in talks, but it is for some regulations to decide how that would be offered to some specific venues. And in the transportation sector, the robotic bus trials have reached a stage where the public can start to ride on the bus as well. Or even though if it's on a small fixed route, sort of a shuttle bus, but the robotic bus is more of like an autonomous bus, and they are starting to test it in this last month, I think. And they would be continuously testing in different weather conditions, and over the year, we'll see that how it develops further. And an innovative prototype that has been emerging is the 5G street light poles for urban connectivity. Now, these are not only aimed at providing connectivity in dense urban environments, but also providing a housing for sensors so that we have weather monitoring, video surveillance, air quality measurements, as well as providing connectivity to road traffic, and in the future, providing connectivity to self-driving vehicles. And the last example is about a collaboration that is happening between a Finnish network operator and an Indian data analytics company, TCS. They are working together to build smart factories in Finland, improving the manufacturing industry, so to say. Thank you. That's a brief overview from my side regarding the recent developments that have happened in Finland. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaspreet. That was quite useful. So, you wanted to say something, Paul?
Yeah, I also wanted to say, interesting again, that Jaspreet also focused on the collaboration issue between different companies to make things happen, but also himself being part of ecosystems with industry to develop solutions that are good within the 4th Industrial Revolution. Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Jaspreet, and we'll come back to you on that at a later stage. I think Sachin will invite Mr. Pathak now for some comments. I think maybe Mr. Pathak would like to react to a bit of what Benoit has indicated, has mentioned as a start. Mr. Pathak?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to all the distinguished panelists. I see a lot of persons joining from the Europe also. And I would like to thank Mr. Benoit for, I think, summarizing all the relevant points. I was never thinking that you will be covering even cyber security also, which is very much important, research and innovation, and high performance computing, and standards. Standards already we have with us Mr. Satish, so he will be covering that part also. As far as policy aspect, because being the government, I would like to focus on the policy aspect. So I would like to say that India has launched Digital India program, and this is a program, one can say, overarching, comprises of a number of departments, or one can say right now, post-COVID, all the departments, because it provides a sea of opportunities for technology-driven socio-economic transformation. You name any sector and that's the provide. Digitization is the most effective instrument for increasing the outreach of both private and public sectors, we have realized, and developing countries can contribute in global supply chain. So this is, I think, this technology has enabled this, and the government and the people around the world has seen the power of technology for the first time during this pandemic COVID. This, with the digitization, what is important that startups, SMEs, they'll be able to compete with the global market leaders. Otherwise, it's not possible. And over the last 2 years, Digital India has laid a robust foundation for India to embark on digital transformation. Subsequently, I will be covering what is meant by digital transformation. As far as, since I belong to Department of Telecommunication, so on the policy front, we have already National Digital Communication Policy 2018, which has a clear mission on a number of other articles, but there is a clarity on harnessing the power of emerging digital technologies, including 5G, AI, IoT, cloud, big data, to enable provision of future-ready products and services, and to catalyze the fourth industrial revolution by promoting investment. Investment was covered as a part of Benwa, as one of the pillar, innovation and IPR. So as far as policy is concerned, Government of India has already enabled this with the policy, and it's a very, we are working on all these aspects for implementation of this policy. If you go for the fourth industrial revolution, that provide opportunity to unite global communities, to build sustainable economies, and to adopt and modernize governance models, and to reduce material and social inequalities. So my thrust will be on social part, because that's where government has to play a bigger role also. And to commit the value-based leadership of emerging technology, it can foster a more empowering, collaborative, and sustainable foundation for social and economic development. And this we have seen during our ongoing pandemic also. As far as work done by this Department of Telecommunication is concerned, way back, some 2 years back, we set up one 5G high-level forum, which was comprising of Department of Telecommunication, as well as Ministry of Electronics and IT, another department, and Department of Science and Technology. So this was co-chaired by all the 3 departments, and they clearly spelled out a report on making India 5G ready. So that was the first action. There are so many related actions suggested by under this, and a lot of actions on spectrum policy, regulatory policy, education and awareness program, application and use case labs. So use case labs, I think we will be discussing. So that is also very much important when we are discussing either 5G or related technology like IoT or AI. So it's the use case which will drive even for operators or even for the businesses also. And development of application layer standards. I think this is the first initiatives by us that there is no application layer standard right now, or if there is a work, then that is in silos. So how can you work together with the global community on application layer standards, and naturally consistent participation in international standards? That's where I think even India and EU projects, they have also facilitated participation of startups. I'll be covering subsequently on that part also. For the first time with this 5G high level forum, government has funded indigenous 5G test bed. So this indigenous test bed is a consortium project, multi-institute collaborative project, in which there are, we call it Indian Institute of Technologies. So Madras, Delhi, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Kanpur, and ISC Bangalore, and 2 institutions, Society for Applied Microelectronics Engineering and Research, and Center of Excellence in Wireless Technology, Madras. So all they are working along with other startups and industry. So this test bed is likely to enhance national capability in telecom technologies, develop our IPRs, and give fillip to Indian telecom manufacturers. I would further like to, as a part of collaboration, there is already a collaboration project running in India, that is an India-Swedish framework. Ericsson set up 5G test bed at IIT Delhi. So that's would like to thank for these initiatives by EU side. As a framework to make 5G and enabled other technology related with this, we have already liberalized experimental spectrum and technology trials guidelines. So now it's very simple, very nominal charge. Any company can get, including manufacturers, the spectrum required for technology trial in India. Another new development is that you may be aware that India joined the League of Leading Economies to launch the global partnership on artificial intelligence recently. So we are now joining as a founding member. So India will be actively participate in the global development of artificial intelligence. We have issued separate strategic papers also by so many departments here, and leveraging its experience around use of digital technology for inclusive growth. That is more important. Further, for implementation of National Digital Communication Policy, we have launched National Broadband Mission with the objective of broadband for all. So broadband for all will be very important initiatives of Government of India, in which we will be connecting not only the cities, but the rural. That is of more important. As far as taking this COVID example, that has shown that this advantage of big data, we have created heavily resourced database to track and predict infectious risk used in conjunction with extensive screening protocol. In India, we call it Arogya Setu. So that is being effectively utilized for tracing and being enforcing along with the social distancing. Entire world has seen during this pandemic, only telecom infrastructure has been up and running. Otherwise, we are all just locked down in our this one. And we have seen for the first time that most of the offices have been running. It means this work from home and other things, whatever we have learned during this pandemic, will be the new norm of life subsequent to even this pandemic also. And in India, we have used extensively for the finance and online payment, health, I will say telemedicine. We have in fact issued the telemedicine practice guidelines during this period itself. Education, I think most of the school educations, even primary educations to higher educations, they are all online. So we have realized the value of technology here, all sort of technology. E-services and common sector has enabled online delivery of services. So even government has to transfer the money to a worker, then we have done with the help of mobile, with the help of utilizing this connectivity. So I think I would like to share at introduction only this. Subsequently, I would like to thank the organizers again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. I think it was a good overview of the number of interventions that Government of India is making. And I think there's no denial that the COVID has given a sense of urgency and has accelerated innovation in India and as well as in Europe. So maybe it might be a good idea, Paul, that we get a quick reaction from other panelists. So Arvind, after listening to Benoit, listening to Mr. Pathak, listening to Jaspreet, what's your quick reaction on fourth industrial revolution, if I may ask as a introductory remark? Need to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Sachin. Thanks, Paul, for having me here. And I was recently handling strategy and business development till recently and transitioned to a new role. And it's an excellent opportunity to present my perspective here. In fact, this panel discussion is happening in a very opportune time for Bosch, because we kickstarted Manufacture Like a Bosch campaign some 3 days back, which is there in the media. You can actually search for that. And Bosch actually is reinventing itself into a software, sensors, and services company. It's metamorphosing itself from a component-driven company to a more of a software and services-centric company. So in this context, we feel, fourth industrial revolution, or 4I or I4.0, is actually a great opportunity for us to leverage and also contribute. We see the technology spend of around 150 million euros in next for 4 to 5 years in this sphere. And we are in a unique position to try out many things in our own factories, in our plants, and then go to the customers and then implement them. In this context, what is I4.0 for us? It is basically when factories can be adapted to any requirement and learn independently at the same time. So what are we looking at basically? We are looking at main thing is efficiency. You minimize the redundancies, eliminate the waste, reduce downtime, only have planned downtimes, don't have any unplanned downtime. So that is a key. And last but not the least, the seamless connectivity, which enables real-time dynamic decision-making based on data, enabling optimal results. So the essence is to combine the best of people, machines, and data. While artificial intelligence and algorithms, software algorithms take over, we still put people at the center of everything, and people still control the operations. So that is how we see I4.2. And we have implemented complete connected ecosystem clusters and factories in Germany, and slowly the world over, we are implementing gradually. And with this success of what we have done, we are already able to engage with customers. So that's a very brief introduction. In fact, Benoit, Jaspreet, and Mr. Pathak all covered other elements. So I would actually join the panel as and when we progress. For the introduction, this is what I would actually place in front of.
No, I think that's a very important contribution from you, Arvind, and I see in you a great supporter, coming for the innovation, and like you already offered or mentioned that, you could incubate a lot of innovation.
Absolutely.
And in our previous discussions also, you have mentioned that, how eager you are to support a wider ecosystem, to innovate. And with this link, I would like to bring in Satish here for a quick reaction. Satish, if you can unmute yourself and, give us a quick reaction on what you have learned from your other panelists. What, if you like to share? Yeah.
Yes. So at least the discussion so far, if I want to summarize, if I have to summarize the learnings, one of the key learnings that comes out is collaboration, which Benoit was emphasizing. Not necessarily just in terms of innovation standards, but also in terms of policy exchanges, because much of the fear of automation comes from having to I would say that the fear of automation is coming from security. I mean, the recent geopolitical scenarios puts a lot of emphasis on security of critical infrastructure, as it is called, for any country. So that is very critical. Having said that, if there has to be meaningful protocols, meaningful collaboration. It does not necessarily have to be just at the standardization level, but also has to be at the policy level. Those are the key aspects where the collaboration has to be, and that is what I can gather from the discussion so far.
But also a quick point here, Satish, in focus of fourth industrial revolution, US Geo, and when you see somebody like Bosch here in India, do you see already some early ideas that how could you enable wider innovation in India?
So if I may summarize, see, there are two aspects to this overall industry 4.0. One is, of course, you have what is called as data control. Data control is there's a whole bunch of data which is coming in from the machines which are already deployed, and how do you handle it? So if you look at much of the information which is coming into a body like 3GPP from bodies, different other bodies like the automation industry or any other industry segment, they all relate to data control or machine control. Machine control is stringent, machine control is risky. For a lot of businesses, machine control is also something called as operational risk. They don't want to open up very early on. So much of the emphasis has been on the data control. So when you're talking about data control, it's about collecting a lot of data. What do you do with data? Big data, standards related to data, monetization of data, and whose data belongs to whom. Those are the key issues which typically get discussed. That's also where much of the policy-related issues come into picture. So this is precisely where the emphasis has to be. And if I may say, these are very early days as far as industry 4.0 is concerned, because specifically if you look at, people have been talking about 5G, Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi 6 is a key enabler as well. Nobody seems to be talking about Wi-Fi 6, but that's also one of the key enablers, not just 5G. So these are early days. Why do I say these are early days? Forget about policy, forget about security for the time being. The standards are also still maturing. Still maturing. Why? So far, we have not seen adoption of widespread IoT technologies like Narban IoT. Then you have 5G specification, which is still evolving, and certain aspects like non-private networks, which are key for industrial automation, is yet to be standardized. It is expected to come in release 17 of 3GPP. It is on the way. It's yet to come. So these are some of the gaps. And then again, having the key APIs, flexible APIs, to enable a whole set of so-called vertical industries is still work in progress as far as 3GPP is concerned. You also have a lot of other forums like 1M2M, which is trying to cook up services layer. But then the services layer, if you look at a architecture, if you look at the architecture of something like a services layer, you have to fit in a lot of verticals, and that's a long process because every other vertical has its own demands and requirements, and you're trying to pull a mean across all the standards. So that is also something that has to be taken into account. So sure. I would say these are early days for Industry 4.0. Right. This is not putting it in a very pessimistic way, but then again saying that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and innovation and policy optimization over a period of time.
No, it's good to learn from you, Satish, because you are on the ground and you see it from there. And I think it's also right time to bring in Thomas, because Thomas, your job title suggests that you have been looking at this topic for quite some time. So share with us some German examples, maybe where you have made much more progress in this topic.
Yes, sure. Basically, maybe some general remarks to the fourth industrial revolution. And this is to us and to me personally, really undoubtedly a pretty widespread theme in even in the evolution of mankind and how we live and work. From a telecoms operator perspective, this is for us simply the future of business and society, I would say. Undoubtedly, we are working on the underlying network technology, and we see huge opportunity in incremental value creation. I think this is something we need to point out. Value creation and the foundation for completely new business models. And getting back to some remarks from Benoit, I completely agree that it is a revolution in connectivity. Undoubtedly, we have been covered by techniques. We have gone a long way from 2G, 3G, 4G, LTE, and such. And now connectivity will get even more important. There is this big role of data. Completely agree. The importance of cybersecurity, already mentioned. What I also would like to add to the discussion is also the importance of data analytics. And this is also a huge thing leading to new business models. And when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, I think it is clear that we are all looking for new routes into the future. And this, it is all about growth. I think this 5G technology will bring pretty much to the table. So I could now speak a lot of what we are doing, because I have to say for Deutsche Telekom, this 5G infrastructure, we are pretty much in execution mode, I would call it. I could give you some numbers, and I was really interested to learn from Satish that he is saying, okay, this is pretty early days. You're absolutely right with this, but in the same time, it is also early days for us, but we are doing pretty big steps and are doing also huge investments, I have to say. And we are coming possibly to the spectrum purchase thing and what might be accelerators and such to move this whole thing forward. Yeah, but basically we are doing a lot. I think Benoit will like to hear that we are not only doing that in Germany and the US. Mentioning the US is, you might have heard about this Deutsche Telekom or T-Mobile US and Sprint merger with the interesting situation and fact that we are already covering 210 million subscribers, American citizens in the US. We have the coverage by the end of this month for 40 million inhabitants in Germany, which is approximately 50% of our overall inhabitants. And we have some pretty interesting European projects going on. Beside Germany, what I already mentioned, in Hungary, in the Czech Republic, in Austria, and also in Croatia. And if we come to this, and if we have some time, I could also let you know what we are doing there. And I think this will come later in the panel discussions. Getting back to my respected colleague or ex-colleague from Bosch, I think we will probably touch the importance of campus area networks. Yeah, when it comes to smart factory and such, I think this is also one of our very early adapter use cases, I would say. And I could let you know what we are doing in this space. We even have some reference customers there, and I have sent yesterday evening some material to the event organizers. But there are so many interesting things going on for Deutsche Telekom also, not only mentioning the smart factory thing, but also smart city programs, I think pretty important. And then also edge computing. We might talk about the gaming industry, yeah, which will be heavily impacted by 5G. Already mentioned augmented reality and such. So I'm happy to share some things we are doing, but basically the main key sentence is that we are pretty much in execution already.
Thank you, Thomas. That's good to learn. I think that's quite rewarding already that we have somebody like you here. And I'm afraid that, we have so much to learn, but the clock is running, So I would request that when we go into the next round, we keep the, answers very brief, because there are also very good questions coming. I think some of you have already seen in the Q&A tab, some good questions are coming. So also want to highlight, there's a lot of collaboration already happening between India and EU in many ways, and some companies are too far ahead in their progress. Like Jaspreet mentioned news, of an Indian company, and I'm also aware some Indian companies doing collaboration already on 6G with the Finnish flagship project. So I think everybody is looking at opportunities right now, and they're running fast. So over to you, Paul, for the next round, and let's do a very quick set of questions so that we can also take up questions later from the audience.
Right, Sachin. Well, next round, I think let's keep this interactive. I don't think we should keep on going in rounds. I think we should pick up on some of the issues that everybody has highlighted. And again, we heard about collaboration. So this is actually a question I like to pick from one of the participants, a colleague from GIZ, who says, look, in Germany, for Industry 4.0 or Fourth Industrial Revolution, there's actually a platform for that. It's a key institution to actually coordinate efforts among industry and government to move forward and discuss items within the Fourth Industrial Revolutions. And in India, there seems to be several initiatives on Industry 4.0 by the DHI, by Niti Aayog, by Confederation of Indian Industry. So I'd like to ask you, and I think I'll start maybe with Satish first as an industry player, and then maybe Mr. Pathak afterwards. Maybe you can also give your comment on this. What is your perspective on the need of an Indian platform for Fourth Industrial Revolution to coordinate maybe efforts among industry and government, and which organization might be best placed to drive such an initiative? Yeah, Satish, first you.
Yes. So the organization which can drive this initiative is TSDSI, the Indian Standards Development Organization. I think that is the best platform to take this forward. And I wasn't aware of these multiple of these Indian platform development. I was not aware of it, but what I do believe is there's no separate effort to develop something called as an Indian platform. We are in collaboration with 1M2M and of course 3GPP. So we are trying to develop globally harmonized platform systems or standards from our side. That is also sensitive to a lot of Indian industry concerns. That's one of the key things. So we have good understanding of what's happening in the Indian industry, because we have, and in fact we are still trying to understand this whole Industry 4.0 specifically from an IoT business. Simple questions like, say, for example, if you have a platform, and if you have in your factory, if you have machines from Japan and Germany, you can collect data from both these machines, but you can never make them talk to each other because of the whole lot of proprietary interfaces which are there. So we are trying to address these kind of issues, and TSDSI is the best forum to take this forward.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pathak, would you like to react?
Yeah, now I'm unmuted. So I think what Satish clarified, that as far as platform is concerned, that is a TSDSI. I think you are referring to the user ministries and department. Like even other, whatever is mentioned is DHI, this Department of Heavy Industry and other things. So they are just enabling, but once we go for the framework, then that is the TSDSI where we decide the standard part. So the technical work has to be here, and they are the user ministry, how this will be taken into account. So for that, I support Mr. Satish, and we have to synergize our work in that direction.
Okay, so you both welcome a platform that takes this up, this engagement, this bridge between industry and government, maybe in a structured format and consolidated in one place. Okay, thank you. Aravind, I'd like to turn to you and really, this might be a question that will also interest Mr. Pathak and Benoit alike. So you're one of the forerunners, if you will, in Fourth Industrial Revolution. What do you see is a barrier for the uptake of the technology or the solutions within this? And you might have the perspective of what you are able to do in Europe and what you're able to do in India, and what is the difference between the two, and sort of highlight that. Maybe you can give us some insights on that.
Very good question, Paul. Thanks for that. I feel that a holistic approach is sometimes not understood when we talk about I4.0 and with different stakeholders. You know, no connectivity factory and a fully connected ecosystem. There are two ends, if I see, and there are so many things possible in this, you know, range of options. There are a range of options. So it becomes, you know, very contextual in terms of I4.0 implementation. So you talk to a company like Reliance, they may look for an end-to-end view. And you talk to small and medium enterprises, they have a different view. So overall, the understanding of what is I4.0 is highly contextual and depends on the awareness and the ability to invest in technology and reap benefits. So that is one thing which I'm seeing. And also the total cost of ownership for small and medium enterprises, especially countries like India, is actually a big concern. So we may have to tailor our solutions, which we implement in advanced markets. Especially, we may have to look at collaboration, which all of us spoke about, collaboration with local partners, local startups. So that could probably alleviate the situation, which I'm talking about as the first point. The second point is the standards per se are still evolving. I think Satish said we are in early days. I truly believe that the standards are still evolving, awareness of the standards, and also ensuring complete interoperability is another barrier in my view. And then there are integration challenges and the cyber security and data ownership. We are talking about cloud, we are talking about private, public, hybrid. What happens to the data? Who owns the data? What is the data security which we'll look at? So this is another barrier. Last but not the least, even the organization design per se can actually be a challenge to implement I4.0 if you don't have a matrix, sort of a very integrated organization, and if you still have silos, that also is a big barrier in my view. Paul.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, Benoit, would you like to have a quick reaction to this?
I mean, I can have a quick reaction, but I think Arvind has been really quite comprehensive in all the elements. And I was just crossing all the points that I had because he was just mentioning them. So I won't repeat it, but I think, yes, one key element, and I would really insist on that, and it has been said as well, is integration. I mean, this revolution, I mean, we have this core and this underlying system, but it will touch each and every vertical. And what we need is that the system is able to integrate and to allow this coordination and this speaking to each other. So all this set of data should be linked. And that's why, I mean, we keep insisting on why it is so important to ensure and to create this global platform which will be able to retrieve the data. So the way, not only where you store, but the way you store them, so that you have a unique system that will allow, I mean, the retrieval and the processing of this data, I mean, is absolutely essential. The second one, and I would just stop on that, but Arvind mentioned it as well, whereas he mentioned it on the aspect of ownership of data. That's linked to that, and I know that some very big companies are very eager to protect their own data because they feel that definitely, I mean, it has a lot of value. Whereas I believe that for taking it, I mean, there is value in developing a data strategy where you can define the conditions for sharing data for the benefit of all. So that's something that also would merit, I mean, more attention.
Thank you, Benoit. You're right. You're right. Thomas, I'd like to turn to you for a minute, because I can imagine, Arvind was saying that Bosch is reinventing itself. I can assume that telecom operators are also reinventing themselves, especially in this space, because now also you're not the monopolist of spectrum. Now factories themselves can take spectrum. So you also thinking about business models, and but still, I'd like to hear you work for a great number of sectors, of verticals. Yeah. Who are the early adopters of the fourth industrial revolution, and what are your suggestions for anybody involved in this to make this pick up? And the thinking behind this is, we have very big companies on this panel. We have telecom, we have Geo, we have Bosch. But what about, and a lot of the questions from the participants all relate to small and medium-sized enterprises. Yeah. So how do they get onto this wagon quickly as well? I know this was several questions, but maybe you can club the answer around that as well. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So I think basically we all have a role to play in this overall evolution. And for a telecom operator, for a carrier, and this is true internationally, our turf, so to say, is the infrastructure. And with this, for us, in a sense, it is an evolutionary process, because what I mentioned already, we come a long way, yeah, and we have a pretty a strong network and a pretty good coverage and such with the 4G technology, mentioning LTE and such, and now we are entering into this new phase. So for us, it is more or less in our lifeblood, yeah, to push this thing forward. As I mentioned, lots and lots of investments. You mentioned spectrum. This is something also where we might come to in this discussion situation, is that we as a company, a private traded company, had to buy for billions, yeah, for many billion euros, a spectrum, which on the one hand side is good for the German government, on the other hand side is kind of reducing the budget we can spend into the infrastructure, meaning the core network, but also all these antennas and such. So this is kind of difficult. And we also wrestle with other things, mentioning the federalistic system, which I think is also true for India. So many different states. So in Germany, we have 16 different regions. All of them sometimes have an own idea, yeah, on how to support this whole thing moving forward. This ends up with interesting things like building permits for antennas. Yeah, sometimes we have to request and wait quite a long time until we then can really build it up and such. But basically, these are some things we're wrestling with. But basically, when it comes to the early adopters and the industries, I think it was already mentioned. What we are seeing is the smart factory stuff. So with the campus area networks in the recent past, much of this communication also in very large plants in these organizations have been organized with Wi-Fi, yeah, WLAN systems, but also LTE, which is now then moving into 5G with some interesting technology aspects and such. So campus networks for really the production, and as I mentioned already, with the project we are having in the broader EU, it is pretty much the connection of digital workstations for Industry 4.0, robotics, and autonomous transport systems, for example. This is what happens in the large enterprise segment. And when it comes to the small and medium businesses, which you mentioned, I think it is basically mainly about broadband connections. Yeah, and we have a huge discussion here in Germany also about the evolution of then fiber to the home, yeah, and fiber to the small and medium businesses, which then yeah brings much of speed, yeah, to some of the new applications they're running. And I think to stop with this, the data analytics thing seems also to be very promising as an early adopter scenario, because combined with edge computing, yeah, you can really yeah calculate and gather data from the edge and then bring it to the main data centers and such, and analyze these huge amount of data, which then also leads into new business models, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I mean, you ended on a note of data analytics, and there's actually a question from the audience whether you could share a stellar example of a use case using data analytics.
Yeah, we have. Let me see. We are working in Austria, for example, under the project name of Smart Factory at University of Graz.
You just muted yourself, Thomas, or someone muted you by mistake. I don't know.
Sorry for that. So we are actually one example from Austria, yeah, where we are working in partnership with the University of Graz, with 19 different partners, and most of them startups. And I have to say also, to bring this into the discussion, I think the cooperation, the work together and collaboration with startups in this whole thing is very, very important. And they are in the early days also small and medium companies, so to say, pretty important. But when it comes to data analytics, these folks are working on a complete industrial production chain with robot arms. For example, another one is on a metal 3D printing, and these systems deliver lots of data, yeah, which then will get analyzed to optimize, let me say, the production process. And I think this is basically yeah, one main thing really to analyze, and then in the sense of optimizing then a production chain.
Yeah, and again, you mentioned multi-stakeholder collaboration. University, yourselves, 19 startups, and I know that Arvind also has a view on this, because you're also very active in creating an ecosystem around yourself, working with startups, working with chambers and associations for innovation. Arvind, do you want to expand a bit on that?
So Arvind, you need to unmute yourself. And before you start, Paul, just a time check. So it might be a good idea to get a good, you know, this could be the last question, and everybody could say the synergies between EU and India, and especially the role of startups. Arvind, if you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sachin. We can't hear you, Arvind.
Is it clear now? Sorry.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. I think, can you rephrase the question, Thomas? I mean, Paul, I just...
Yes, no, I was just saying that Thomas referred to a use case of multi-stakeholder collaboration between a telecom operator and a university and 19 startups. And I know you're doing the same in different areas to spur innovation and to move development forward. And I just wanted you to expand on that.
Absolutely. In fact, Bosch invested in setting up Robert Bosch Institute for Cyber-Physical Systems in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, where we had some projects going on. And recently, we did invest in IIT Madras, Indian Institute of Technology Madras. We set up what is called Bosch Center for Artificial Intelligence, where we have some projects going on. There are a lot of proof of concept projects which we actually test out something and then see whether we have go-to-market opportunities. That is on the academic collaboration side. The other side where we actually collaborate in terms of open innovation is we have a program at Bosch level. There are open VC forums where we collaborate startups in Germany and world over. And closer in India, we have a flagship program called Discover, Nurture, and Align DNA. Now we are rebranding it as DNA Next, which is a startup alliance program where we partner with startups who would work on Bosch use cases. And then we develop them. We have a cohort. We actually filter them, screen them, and all that. Finally, we form a cohort where they work on Bosch use cases. And then once the proof of concept is ready, we actually look for go-to-market opportunities. Recently, we had some good number of MOUs or memorandums of understanding being signed with 6 startups. And we hope to see the benefits going forward. Paul.
Thank you, Arvind. Maybe, Paul, we take this question to Mr. Pathak, and, I can inform you, sir, if you unmute yourself. In the previous webinar also, we learned that many of the European organizations here in India are doing a great effort in connecting with startups. So maybe 2 questions to you, if you can highlight what your organization has been doing in terms of 5G hackathon. Maybe our audience do not know. And also, how can wider ecosystem link with what you are doing?
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
So basically, I think you have touched the 5G hackathon. So when we are planning for doing the 5G trials, then we just interested that can there be use cases and how can we bring startups. So in place of calling it 5G challenge, though that is actually 5G challenge, we call it 5G hackathon, and just wanted to reward 100 applications, use cases. And this was launched on 21st Feb, and period was up to 30th April. And to our surprise, we have received 1024 applications. So exactly 2 to the power 10. And they are right now, we are evaluating those applications. They are under 10 verticals. And I think I have seen that there is a lot of new use cases in agriculture, health, logistics, fintech. So all are covered, and separately we have naturally hardware and other things. So that's another example. So we have, potential 1024, one can say use case we have received. So you can just see this is the enthusiasm among the participants for use cases. And since, as you told that since EU businesses, they are here. So even India being the 3rd largest startup ecosystem, we have the skills. Continuously, we are, I think, improving skills also in technology domain. So there is a first opportunity that India and you can share your problem statement, even in case of 4.0 also, because then we can work together. So that is a very good opportunity for EU businesses and India to work together. So that's my first one can say. There is a cyber security. Once we are saying Internet of Things means we will be just opening a lot of personal data. So I think this is an opportunity to even work on cyber security of Internet of Things also. So that is also very much important. We can collaborate on standards. And I think already this project, Mr. Sachin is referring to Indo-EU project, we a lot of gain from utilization opportunity offered by the project. And since that, I think ended in perhaps October 2019 and extended for 6 months. So I think there is an opportunity. One can say, okay, I will say that you extend it again for further for mobilizing the specific projects for the research community, Center of Excellence. You can just think of the opening Center of Excellence even we can work with an open source also. There is got a lot of opportunity, and startups, which in turn will promote building of standardization capability, adoption of globally harmonized standards, and increased contribution to global standards. So again, this is my request that under the project right now, Indo-EU, I think ICT, so we can cover this additional also in addition to funding for the standardization development through TSDSI. So you can just think on that line also. So and we have set up one use case on fintech at IDRBT Hyderabad, that is a RBI institutions for the financial sector. So even I think there is a lot of opportunity for both the countries and business together to work on use cases. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Satish, a quick remark from you to enable this innovation ecosystem. You as an industrial player, I'm sure a lot of action is going on. If you can just share a quick remark on this. If you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, what is the broad question?
The broad question is, what are the synergies that you see between India and EU, and where does the startup ecosystem fit in? Any remarks on that?
Yeah, I think as Benoit had earlier indicated that we have same, India and EU have similar cultural and cultural ethos, I would say. So there is a lot of synergy in terms of having to exchange whatever we call it as policy requirements for enabling fourth industrial revolution. See, one of the key things that we are seeing is the geopolitics. If we look at the geopolitics, the Far East is getting into a bucket. You see America as one bucket, so that leaves EU and India in a bucket. So in that sense, we become natural allies as far as these things are concerned. So yeah.
Sure, Satish. Thank you for that comment. I think we have only a few minutes left. Paul, is there any question that we should be taking from the panel, or you want to?
I was thinking I would be interested in more use cases, but I know that's a big topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a personal interest. But again, I mean, some of the participants have asked questions, but relating to what we've already been discussing. Mr. Patak and Satish also referred to it earlier. This platform that could collaborate. There was a question specifically whether this could be done in the specifically 5D field relating to fourth industrial revolution. But other than that, I think we've had a good round. Sachin, maybe I would also be interested to ask one question to Jaspreet of his view, because he's an Indian sitting in cold Finland researching on this topic. Yeah, so getting inspired maybe by Finland and maybe having an ambition to look at how can he deploy some of that in India, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's the Finns learning a lot from Jaspreet. So Jaspreet, if you have a minute, and you did speak a bit about what you were working on, but I'd like to also know how you see yourself fitting into the ecosystem that everybody has been speaking about, this connection between industry, academia, and government as well.
Yes, India, regarding India has a huge potential to become a manufacturing hub, not just for itself, but for the whole world as well. And when we think about that, how Europe is doing, it's taking some considerable steps. And these steps might be very small and baby steps for now, but that's how human development happens. And as we are in the early stages, we will see how radically it changes how things are basically done. And for moving forward, we would have to think about how the adoption of these technologies happens. We would have to rework some frameworks. We would have to think of the timelines of these technologies and the projects that are ongoing. And state-of-the-art studies help a lot in doing that. So when we think about automation or furthering the level of digitalization today in factories, we need to conduct what state they are currently at and how we can move forward from there. So yeah, these all these technologies that are upcoming and developing will definitely help and understand better through research and collaboration.
Thank you, Jaspreet. Please keep at it. We need academic support in this.
Paul, if I may add to this, I think I was already flagging this to Mr. Pathak, that we have people like Jaspreet on the other side who could be the natural, linkage to, bring more research connections to India. And, until 2020, EU was running the Horizon 2020 framework, under which, India could collaborate, because there was a MOU between DST and H2020. And we have not seen many telecom collaboration. So maybe what Thomas mentioned about 19 startups with University of Graz, it was theoretically possible to also have an Indian university participate in it. It was legally possible under the framework, but there was lack of awareness. Maybe going forward, we should have more such projects. I see all the pieces of jigsaw here. We have Bosch, we have Arvind, we have Gio, Satish, we have Mr. Pathak. Everybody wants to enable. It might be a dream come true if, we have something enabled with all of their efforts. So maybe that's my concluding remark. But if anybody has one line to say, feel free, and we can close the webinar for today. So
I'm sure Benoit has one line of motivation for all of us.
Thank you. No, I would just like to build on what you said, both, and Jaspreet as well. I think we should not underestimate the human factor. I mean, we've talked a lot about this technology and also putting the companies together, but it's very important. Thank you very much for what you said, Sachin. I mean, we do work actually on a policy level with the Ministry of External Affairs to favor the mobility of innovators both ways, innovators from EU to India and from India to the EU, because you have also very practical aspect, and I'm sure Jaspreet could talk about that. I mean, such as visas or work authorization and all these permits, which needs to create a conducive environment for exchange between the innovation spheres of India and EU. And definitely, I mean, this is linked to, and thank you, Sachin, for mentioning this Horizon 2020, which are formidable opportunity for creating links, such as the participation of students. And that's also an element where we work very much in trying to have exchange of students between universities in EU and India, because it also creates these links and reinforce this shared and common vision of the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Sachin, I have a nice one as a closing remark from my side. Just wanted to let you know an example on how we from Deutsche Telekom trust in India and Indian people is the fact that last week we appointed Mr. Srini Gopalan, yeah, an Indian genius and a huge talent, yeah, to run our German business, yeah. That a person will run not the European business, which his responsibility was before, but he will move into the big shoes, yeah, and be the successor of someone and run the German business, which is very, very important for us as the German incumbent. So might be a nice link between Germany and India. Indian guy is running our core business. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Thomas. Any last remarks from anyone else before we close? Mr. Pathak, Arvind, Satish?
I think it was a great interaction, and Paul wanted some use cases. I thought of mentioning briefly about paperless production and logistics is a very serious use case which we are pursuing. So that is one use case which I thought I'll bring it in, but I'm mentioning it here, and it was a great discussion with all of you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, thank you. We have a lot of center of excellences in IoT as well as telecom, so we can collaborate also.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. Satish, you were trying to say something?
Yes, so post-COVID, I think the scenario is very different now. And I think the span of collaboration, what we were discussing pre-COVID to post-COVID will be very different. And I think we will have to relook at most of the collaboration efforts which were earlier on dictated by whatever other considerations. We will have to relook at them, and I think that will throw up a lot of opportunities for further collaboration between EU and India.
Thank you, Satish. I think, Paul, if you're okay, we then conclude the webinar.
Yes, Sachin, conclude it.
Yeah, and we ran 6 minutes over time. There are still some questions probably which are not answered. And with the contributions of our panelists, there are more questions also which are opening up. So Paul, more work for us. Maybe we can include those topics in the next webinar. So thank you everyone for your contribution, and we are everly grateful to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you to all.
Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Take good care.
Cool. Take care.
Thank you, Thomas, for joining as well. Cheers.